In this lesson, we are going step by step through a plugin chain that works for most vocal recordings. We will also train your ears to focus on specific aspects of a vocal sound like sibilance, warmth, presence, and attitude. In the process of getting a great vocal sound, you will need to keep going back between the different building blocks for fine-tuning. Just as an example, you will need to readjust the sibilance once you've added a compressor. That goes for each building block. It's okay to keep going back and forth between the different building blocks to readjust plugin parameters. An effective vocal plugin chain includes several dynamic processors with EQs before and between them. This is not because we want to crazy overcompress the vocals. On the contrary. These different dynamic processors are sharing the workload of making the vocal sit tight in the mix. The key is to not let any single building block do the heavy lifting on its own. Each has their own specific role, and less is more. Bypassing one or more building blocks is always an option. Many times you don't need all of them. There are basically 4 steps involved. 1. Create a solid continuity at the audio source. 2. Get unwanted frequencies and sibilance out of the way. 3. Create warmth and weight. 4. Create presence and attitude. This course includes a download of different DAW sessions that showcase the principles we are discussing here on vocals across different genres. All of the following, please do at a low listening level. Listening on small portable stereo speakers, aka the kitchen radio, works very well. Make sure to send the correct level into the plugin chain. The raw vocal track should start with an average level of -18 dBFS. If your recording is louder than that, lower it on the input. More about this later. Use the channel fader of your DAW so that the untreated lead vocal sits a little low in the track. Just loud enough so you can understand the lyrics and follow the melody. As we activate more plugins, make sure the input level at each building block is similar to the output level.
Let's say I'm starting to mix vocals on this song.
Well, I guess I better get on down and pray.
F6 RTA is a great tool to judge the level that's incoming into the channel. I want to make sure that 3 things are basically happening. First of all, we want to keep the average level of the audio at the start of the plugin chain around -18 dB. And what's interesting, if you open the analyzer in F6 RTA, this middle line of the analyzer is exactly this line that's marking -18 dBFS. And you can see when I'm playing back this vocal that we're way over this middle line. So we need to reduce the level in the first plugin, which is F6 RTA, to make sure we're starting out at the right place. So let's have a look at it again.
Well, I guess I...
Let me just use the output on F6 RTA to reduce by 10 dB. And since the RTA is set to post, it shows me the level after processing and will reflect what I've just changed.
I better get on down and pray. Is this the end in time? The barrel point between my eyes. I won't have to wait too long.
And this is exactly where I want the vocal level to be. I need to watch several things. One thing is what I've just explained, the overall level of the vocal coming into the chain. The second thing is, of course, I need to watch out that there are no peaks that are in the digital red. Digital red would be up here And if you make sure that the entire spectrum is under or around this line, you're absolutely safe. And then also the next step is to make sure that throughout the next plugins I'm opening, I'm staying in a similar range. So let's quickly look at this chain. Here's sibilance, which won't change the level of my vocal. Then there's PureTech MEQ5, and you can see there is a gain knob on this EQ. So say you boost a frequency heavily so that the overall level of the vocal goes up, you could make up for it by reducing the gain on this plugin. And this pretty much happens on every plugin. Of course, here you have an input and an output knob. Then on the SSL channel, of course, you have an output fader and an input gain. Just make sure going from one plugin to the next that you stay within the same range that you had initially. Of course, throughout the chain, your vocal will be more upfront in the mix, but this is not because the overall level is higher. This is because you've used compression and all the tools that we'll be talking about in this module to make sure the vocal sits on top of the backing track.
Before we activate more modules, let's just listen to the untreated lead vocal track. Go through the vocal recording from start to finish and find spots where phrases or syllables of the lead vocal drop in level or jump out considerably. Correct these phrases in whole dB values. We achieve this by cutting the source audio before and after the phrase that needs to be corrected and changing the gain value of that specific clip.
I want to play you this untreated rap vocal so that we can find out whether there are sections that would benefit from clip gaining. Let's have a listen.
Long as I got my money, ain't no way I can't win. Protect myself, protect my squad, go out like I came in. I'm a G, and now my people eat. And I ride with the strap just in case you want to rest in peace.
I think we could definitely make a cut here, make a cut here, and make a cut here. Select this portion, bring it up a little bit, and this one as well. So let's see if this sounds different. Let's just go into the second half and see if this sounds more even than before.
G, and now my people eat. And I ride with the strap just in case you want to rest in peace.
That's the type of clip gaining I'm talking about. Just bring up sections that you think are a little low in level. And I could also bring down this section just by a dB or two. Have another listen.
G, and now my people eat. And I ride with the strap just in case you want to rest in peace.
The purpose of clip gaining before even building the vocal chain is that I don't want to use a compressor or any other processor to do this when it's so easy to do at the waveform level.
Most vocal recordings have some rumbling impact noise under 100 Hz. So unless there was already a filter in the recording path, you have to remove these with a high-pass filter. Let's have a look at the RTA on the F6 plugins to find out what's going on in the low end. Reach for the high-pass filter on the wave's F6 and sweep through the frequencies. The goal is to remove the noises under 100 Hz, but at the same time to not thin out the vocal.
I want you to look at F6 RTA again and focus on this section that has no usable signal. This is definitely below 125 Hz. So let's see if there's anything happening that we need to cut with a filter.
Brother, may I stand on this shaking ground, fighting side by side, nobody's gonna take us down. Sister, save me, I can hear you cry, calling from the mountain where my soul is free to fly.
definitely makes sense to put a filter on this vocal, and looking at the RTA, it will be very easy to find the right settings.
Brother, may I stand on this shaky ground, fighting side by side, nobody's gonna take us down. Sister, save me, I can hear you cry, calling from the mountain where my soul is free to fly.
Do you feel the sound of the vocal leans towards too much sibilance? Time to activate the de-esser module, which is a specialized compressor that has an EQ in the sidechain. A de-esser can reduce the level of syllables that have too much treble, typically between 5 and 12 kHz. Once again, a look at the RTA can confirm what you hear. If you see a spike between 4 and 16 kHz whenever you hear an S, that spike shows you the frequency you want to reduce. Alternatively, reducing the sibilance pre-plug-in chain is a different way to achieve a similar result. In that case, you isolate the S's to their own regions and drag them to a separate track, but same channel strip. This makes selecting all S's at the same time possible. You then reduce the gain on these regions between 6 dB and 10 dB, depending on how much the vocal gets compressed in the mix. You want to set them low enough to run below the threshold of the compressors that follow later in the chain. You can also completely isolate S's to another channel strip and EQ or compress them differently. Same goes for breathing noises.
I want to play you a female pop vocal performance to show you how easy it is to use sibilance to detect the S's in a performance. I'm starting by selecting a preset because it's a female vocal. I select female vocals, so let's look at what's happening.
There's not a whole lot that you can do when you're in conflict with your mother's point of view. She says you ran out of time and there's no patience left. Mama, I love you, but I'm not impressed.
From then on, you can, of course, further tweak the settings, but I would always recommend to see if there's a preset that works for your vocal.
The warmth section consists of two components, a low mid boost, A, and a compressor, B, after that. With the vocal sitting a little low in the track, we need to develop a feeling for what's missing. We do that by adding frequencies using EQs, starting from the low mids. Waves Puigtec MEQ5, adding a broad low-mid boost. The effect we want to get here is that the vocal gets more weight and warmth in the mix. If the vocal is well recorded, it comes with a lot of that quality already, and you may not need to do much here. This is why people use various transformer or tube-based microphones, EQs, or mic pre's. However, a lot of current vocal recordings sound rather thin, and a nice boost in the low mids can fix that. See what happens by boosting the low mids on the Waves Puigtec MEQ5 at different frequencies. If you like the character you're creating with that boost, you can even do a little bit too much of it. The weight and warmth we're adding here can be counterbalanced in the next steps. In case the vocal already sounds overly muddy or boomy, you can use an EQ like the F6 RTA at the beginning of the plug-in chain to locate and remove the frequencies that cause this effect. Watch the interdependence of that. Once you've removed resonances, you have more room to use that broad Pultec boost again.
On this vocal, I detected a little bit of muddiness around 360 Hertz. Let's have a listen.
With your mother's point of view, she says you ran out of time and there's no patience left. Mama, I love you, but I'm not impressed.
So I reduced this frequency a little bit, but there is space for a low mid boost. And before we decide which frequency to boost, we need to be really aware of the frequency spectrum of the vocal. So again, let's look at F6 RTA, and you can see
there's not a whole lot that you can do when you're in conflict
that
with
even the lowest note on this verse is not going lower than 250 hertz. So I think to boost at 500 or 300 is out of question, because this is the area where we've just reduced the muddiness. But let's see if a boost at 200 works well. Let me just do a before and after. I think this frequency really warms the vocal nicely up.
a whole lot that you can.
Before,
There's not a whole lot that you can do when.
after,
There's not a whole lot that you can do when you're.
and then for demonstration purposes, I'm going extreme, which is something I always do when I want to find frequencies that make sense to boost or cut. But for the final boost level, you need to listen to the entire mix, which is a decision we don't need to make now. This is something we do later on when all the instruments or the entire backing track and the backing vocals are playing. Then we can safely make the decision how much we want to boost here. But it's safe to say that the vocal sounds a bit cold, and we can definitely place a low mid boost on this vocal performance.
After the boost, we use the Waves Puig-Child compressor. The purpose of using the Puig-Child compressor here is to add harmonics on top of the low-mid boost and create a sense of glue. Make sure the compression stays very subtle. For a start, reduce no more than 3 dB. A compressor after an EQ boost works so well because the two components interact. The more you boost a specific frequency, as done using the Waves PuigTech EQ in the previous step, the more compression will be applied to that frequency. The two are balancing each other out, which can make that combo sound very organic. In a dense mix, this is where we create the frequencies that make the vocal cut through the rest of the instruments, or in a more dynamic mix, just brighten them up. A. Various EQ boosts between 1 kHz and 8 kHz using the Waves SSL E channel. This is more complicated to get right compared to creating warmth. Start with a SSL type EQ and boost the high shelf at 8 kHz plus 10 dB. Then pull back again to 0 dB and find a great setting for it somewhere in the middle. Try switching between bell and shelf characteristics. Bell will just boost around the set frequency, while shelf also includes all frequencies above. If 8K is boosting sibilants too much, go a tiny bit lower. Continue by using the HMF band to boost at 4K, and the LMF to boost 2 kHz. Move these around until you find a good balance. But keep in mind, not boosting anything is always an option. The goal is to create a cluster of mid-boosts that really becomes one colorful and musical texture of mid-boosts between 1 kHz and 8 kHz.
When using the EQ of the SSL E-Series channel for presence, attitude, and to bring your vocal up front, the key is to use the right frequencies. And this is something you can do by trial and error or a lot of experience, or which is I can recommend to look through all of the presets provided by great mixing engineers. And I have a rock track here, so I want to see what frequencies Chris Lord Alge would use on this rock vox. I bypass the dynamics. I don't need them now. I want to focus on the EQ. And also, let me just use these frequencies, but reset the applied gain and see what's happening with the different bands.
Well, I guess I better get on down and pray. Is this the end in times? The barrel point between my eyes. I won't have to wait too long.
It's no problem for me to just boost these frequencies that Chris Lord-Alge has suggested and really bring the vocal up front, make it super aggressive, but I'm doing way too much here just to demonstrate the potential of this EQ. I can show you what I've ended up with on this mix. These are values around 3 dB, below 3 dB. Here it's just 1 dB. A little bit of boost on each of those frequency bands is a lot more effective than just boosting one band and be done with it. This is something you can not only do on a rock track, this works on every kind of music genre. Of course, on a rock track, I can boost the mids a little harder, but you should try this. The SSL EQ is definitely the tool to bring a vocal up front and give it presence and attitude.
B. Attitude. This compressor's job is to tame the mid-boosts we've just created. We want to see it work hard and fast, but it needs to have a lot of musicality to reduce the harshness of the mid-boosts. The Waves CLA76 compressor in blue stripe mode is the perfect plugin for this job. You can let this compressor work a lot harder than the one used in the warmth block.
I want to show you how the blue version of the CLA76 compressor after the SSL EQ interacts with the EQ. Let me just do something I wouldn't normally do and fully boost this mid-band on the SSL EQ.
Well, I guess
That's definitely too much, but now let's engage the CLA76 and see what happens.
Well, I guess I better get on down and pray. Is this the end in times? The barrel point between my eyes. I won't have to wait too long.
Of course, I boosted way too much, but I wanted to demonstrate how the blue version of the CLA76 makes up for these boosts and still kind of integrates them into the mix. This is why those two elements, the SSL EQ and the blue version of the CLA76, work so well together.
Well, I guess I better get on down and pray.
A final EQ can round off highs and mids. We recommend using the Puig EQP-1A here. This plugin is modeled after the legendary 1950s Pultec EQP-1 tube equalizer. Your vocals will sound more analog when you roll off the top end slightly. Both the boost at 20 Hz and the attenuation at 20 kHz should not affect the essence of the tone you have created. The boosts can add a little bit of weight, and the cut removes top-end energy that only hurts at loud volumes. You can use a limiter at the end of the chain to catch occasional peaks that jump out. Only catch occasional peaks, and set the release time higher than 100 milliseconds. A digital brick wall limiter works well here. We recommend using the classic Waves L1 in this place.
We are back with our rock track, and I want to show you how I'm using L1 limiter just to knock off a few dBs of peaks from the vocal performance to help it integrate better into the mix. I'm using the link button to find the right amount of limiting. The big advantage of the link button is that the level you hear is never changing, but at one point you see that over here the processor starts limiting, and then the key is to find the right setting where it's just knocking off a few peaks and not the entire performance. So let's do this.
Well, I guess I better get on down and pray. Is this the end in times? The barrel point between my eyes. I won't have to wait.
So this should work. And note, I am using the auto release setting, which will automatically set the release time for each peak that the limiter is catching.
The plugin chain outlined above is pretty complex. There is, of course, the possibility of processing the vocals too much with the signal chain like this. When you want a really natural vocal sound, you might just need a subtle tube compressor and the Puig Tech EQs for a basic tone control. A natural vocal sound requires a very good recording, and sometimes we have no chance to influence the quality of the performance and recording. The plug-in chain we just went through is designed to be able to deal with any type of vocal, and when the vocal needs to cut through a dense mix, processing is absolutely necessary. However, subtle settings in each plugin can still add up to create a drastic overall effect, while retaining a natural tone.